this is Sean Taylor, and I am very fortunate to be joined by one of my favorite musicians, an amazing songwriter, guitarist, singer, one of the most exciting live performers I've ever seen. And it's an honor to be chatting to you, and it's an honor to be talking about music. So, hello, Eric Bibb.
Sean, it's so good to see you and talk to you again. And you're looking great. And, you know, as a fellow tribe member, I love to chat with you about all of the above, you know.
Good stuff. It's great to see you, man.
Yeah.
So the new album sounds amazing, Ridin. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, it's really, I think, I think I always say this, but to me, it feels like my best work, you know, on record, as a complete kind of, you know, portrait of what I'm about and the kind of music that really moves me and that I want to share. I've been working with the same producer for many years, Glenn Scott, and we're really just hitting new plateaus, you know, with the way we collaborate. I'm excited, and I'm also excited about finally getting on the road and touring an album, which I haven't done in a long time, you know. I'm off to Australia in a few weeks, and 2-month tour, and then a UK tour in May. So yeah, there's a lot of activity. Yeah, but the album is something that I'm really excited about.
I love listening to it. It sounded so great. And it began, is it correct, with a painting that inspired you with the titles, correct?
Yeah, you know, we originally were even going to use that painting that inspired the album on the cover, but we decided to go another place. But there was a guy, his name was Eastman Johnson, I think, who was a Civil War era painter who painted a beautiful portrayal of an African-American family fleeing slavery on horseback. Mm-hmm. And this is from 1862. So it was just so evocative. I thought about, wow, you know, the whole thing of the legacy of slavery and where we're at today and riding on a horse. And I started thinking about riding on a freedom train, you know, during the civil rights era. And a lot of the songs have some kind of anchoring in historical events, you know, true stuff that happened that people don't really think about enough. And so, yeah, you know, if you can't get it in a history book, you can get it in a song.
Because it's great. I remember one of your previous lyrics was about Rembrandt capturing light. I can't remember what song, but I was going to ask you, how did different types of art inspire songwriting? I remember that line thinking, that's cool.
Wow, good for you. I forgot about that. I don't.
Which song is that? What am
I was just going to try to say, Sean, help me out here. What? Oh man,
it's a great lyric.
It might come to me later.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think really the graphic arts, the visual arts, and music have always had a strong link. Many people who are musicians also sort of are drawn to painting and drawing, vice versa. And it's about harmony and forms and moods and feelings that different colors and sounds, notes, intervals, you know, evoke. So it's all kind of related. I love reading, and I love painters, as you mentioned, Rembrandt. But to me, it's all one. It's just a creative celebration of life, and you can do it in so many ways. And yeah, painting's one.
It's good, cool. I was going to ask the kind of about like your process for writing songs. Do you have like a set process for like every day you wake up and like you have to write, or is it kind of more?
No, it's definitely more organic than that. I don't have a writing room as per se. I write most of my songs at the kitchen table. In the middle of everything else going on. It seems to be, I've never really been one to kind of isolate myself and in a kind of regimented way, devote a certain amount of hours to writing. I know very successful writers who do it that way. But for me, you know, I'll have a guitar hanging around in the kitchen on a stand. And, you know, I'll have an idea that just flash through my head. Sometimes it turns into a non-song that's like an exercise in songwriting, and sometimes it turns into a real song. It could be something I'm reading in the book, or like I said, that painting. But I keep notes, on my phone and in my notebooks. I have lots of notebooks, half filled, it's kind of chaotic. And then I skip to a new notebook because I like new notebooks,
Lucky notebooks.
Yeah.
Would you say it starts with the guitar? Because you seem to have a real massive connection with guitar. Whenever I see pictures of you, you've got a different guitar. It's pretty.
Oh man, my appetite for guitar is just huge. It often starts with the guitar. Not always. Sometimes it'll start with a lyric idea, and I'll pick up a guitar, and a melody will kind of insinuate itself with the first line of the song. But often, I'll be just noodling around on the guitar, and something will happen, a kind of groove, or a pattern, or a chord, and that might just kick it off. Yeah.
When did you start playing guitar? Were you young?
Yeah, 7 or 8. 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
And am I right? Did you do some classical stuff? I remember watching a video of you talking about classical guitar. I was like, interesting.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I had exposure to great guitar players from an early age because my dad hired wonderful guitarists to accompany him. My dad was a wonderful singer who played guitar, but in a very rudimentary way, and he decided, I'm a really good singer. I need a really good guitarist, So he hired some really great people during his career, and they used to come over to the house and rehearse with my dad. And invariably, there would be good steel string guitars, good jazz guitars, good classical guitars. Many of the guitarists my dad worked with were also classically trained as well as being versed in folk and jazz. So I had access to really good instruments. When they would take a break, I would sneak up to the guitar and, fondle it and try to make some music. I took classical lessons from about age 11 for a couple of years. And I was not a great student, but what it did do was expose me to the wonderful possibilities of, the guitar in terms of being almost like an orchestra, And I got really interested in self-accompaniment, early on. I wanted to sing and wanted to play like my heroes. I wanted to have a complete accompaniment that sounded like, this is good on its own. Great if you can have another musician, but this should sound complete. I want to be one of those people who could just say the whole thing with just my guitar and my voice. So the classical guitar thing got me into using my fingers, which evolved into a finger-picking, odyssey, never ending. To me, I'm just amazed at the different ways you can actually make music on a guitar. I've seen so many unusual guitarists with unusual techniques through the years, and it just seems endless. And then, you can get into the world of tunings, and, it just goes mad.
Absolutely. I was always quite curious the way you kind of have your finger on the side of the guitar. When I've seen you finger pick, you almost have it. The person I was thinking of straight away is Tommy Emmanuel does that, and it's like obviously totally different styles.
Are you talking about anchoring the little finger?
Yeah, I was just really curious. I remember trying that and thinking, I need to go to the gym and pump weight. I just couldn't do it. I was just very curious by that because it's very different. You see some guitarists really moving around, but you have it's like an anchor, you say.
Yeah, I kind of anchor it at the wrist so that my fingers are free to move, but free to move in a kind of stable way so that I save time by that anchoring. I can play a little bit faster. I'm not really a speed guy, but I feel like I'm a lot more nimble and accurate when I anchor that wrist there. You're wasting energy, I think, when you have your hand flying free because you have to approach the strings. This way, you're already there. Yeah. I also like to dampen the strings a lot. You know that, Sean. Like a lot of my bluesy stuff, I really like a kind of dampened feeling in the bass. So that wrist there on the bridge there helps.
I was really curious about this stuff because I'm going to ask this question. I was thinking, should I ask it, shouldn't I? But I'm going to ask it because I want to know the answer. It's to do with, when I'd heard Tommy Emmanuel talk about that same technique, he described it as Travis picking. And he talks about Chet Atkins and he talks about Mo Travis, obviously. But I'm thinking, surely there's black blues musicians. All the white guys, I mean, we steal all the ideas of the black blues musicians. That's what we do. Surely there was black blues musicians first, right?
It was, an example I can give you. There was even a guy with a funny name. What was his name? His last name was Schultz, a black man with the name Schultz. But stuff happens. But he was apparently an amazing player who never really recorded. But he was apparently the guy who kind of turned on A.C. Carter, the father, the patriarch of the Carter family, to this finger picking thing, thumb picking kind of thing. He in turn probably introduced it to Merle Travis and folks like that. So I think the origins of it really probably are African American more than anything else. And it got popularized by a popular musician, Merle Travis.
Yeah.
And the Carter family started doing that kind of thing too. So I think, when it comes to American folk music, Americana, whatever you want to call it, which of course has to include all the African American forms, blues and ragtime and that stuff. I think the most innovative aspects of American music in general originate in the African American community. And I think there are reasons obvious for this. I think, for one thing, music was probably one of the main ingredients of the survival package of a whole people. I think without the music, African Americans would not have been able to persevere and survive and even thrive at the same time that all this crazy racism is going on. So I don't think you can ever underestimate the total power of the music and where it came from and who it came to. It came to a people under such duress that we can't even imagine it today. And that's why the music is so enduring and so powerful. That's my theory. I thought a lot about this, man. So the fact that the foundations of American popular music, whether it's Travis picking or rock and roll or whatever, come from that community, that's no surprise. And I wish there would be more recognition of it, because I feel like, for all the influence of African American music on popular music the world over, I still feel like the playing field is not even. I feel like in terms of the financial aspects of the music business and all that, I think the short end of the stick is still a lot of the folks who really are innovative and have set a standard and are sort of still trying to see the same kind of benefits that some of their counterparts have seen. So that's where we're at, But this is a slow process, whether it's in the music business or in life. We're trying to get past our mistakes collectively and our, misunderstandings and our insanity. We're trying to move beyond that into some kind of, copacetic enjoyment of life.
It's interesting. A while ago, you were talking about all the guitarists and all the musicians in your father's house, Leon's, and I immediately thought of your song "In My Father's House." How accurate is that? Was it actually like "Anyone Welcome"? Was that exactly what it was like?
Yes, my mother and father were. I think about this a lot these days because I realize how unique, in many ways, my upbringing was. Here's a upper middle class African American family. My mom has got, several university degrees. My dad's a famous guy who you could see on TV. We lived in a big white house with 14 rooms in an largely African American working class neighborhood, not poor, but middle class. But we had the biggest house on the block. But my parents had friends in all walks of life, all hues, So in a neighborhood where you would not see white friends coming to visit black families, our family was the family where you would see, people who were looking all kinds of ways coming into the house, to the point where kids on the block used to say, "Hey, man, if we had any dealings with white people, let Eric talk to them because he knows these people, Yeah, it was like that was my role. So what I'm saying is that that really wonderful upbringing just made it possible for me to have an outlook on music and on everything else that I consider a huge blessing. I was not segregated in any way. So I heard and saw and met and befriended all kinds of musicians and people from an early age,
And that's New York, right? That's where we grew up in New York.
We grew up in Queens, New York, and then moved to Manhattan. And my father and mother's house was a house of many mansions. And everybody was welcome, and there was a huge awareness of social justice. All of that was part of the mix.
Because a few times when I've seen, lucky enough to see you play live, and I've heard you talking about history and I've heard you talking about America, I've always thought of that New York kind of Langston Hughes poetry,
right?
And the kind of bohemian, but also real pride in where you're from. But at the same time, it's got that urban feel as well as the fact you're obviously into a lot of the country blues. It's a kind of fascinating mixed cocktail.
Well, it surprised my parents. My choice of genre. Gravitating towards rural country blues was a surprise for my parents, who had this son who grew up in the middle of the most happening metropolis in the world, intellectuals all around. And here I am embracing the music of basically illiterate farmers. And to me, I had exposure to that music early on. The folk music movement that my dad was a big part of embraced all of those country folks from Leadbelly on, Brunsey, and then the more gentrified players of that music, Josh White, etc. But all of that was something I heard early on. And of all the good music I heard, and I heard great classical music, great jazz, my uncle being a prominent jazz player, John Lewis. Of all the music styles that I heard and loved, it was really American folk music with an accent on the African American style. They really grabbed me from an early age, even though I was far from it experientially, somehow it resonated with me.
Yeah, because it's fascinating the different mixes. I can hear the jazz. I can hear jazz in there quite often. And I think I heard your daughter. I remember the last time Sweet Play Love, she was opening a few. That was really jazz. That was fantastic. And then, but I can hear the jazz in there. And then you can hear definitely the folk, the soul, the blues, and then the gospel. I can hear gospel. And I mean, it's one of my memories of playing live open for you was in this church in the Netherlands, and before the sound check, you were just doing this a cappella riffing, and I was like, wow, this is kind of a nice way to spend an evening, listen to you singing. This is cool. But were all of these influences, did it all arrive at the same time, or has it been a gradual thing? Or?
No, it's almost always been like all at once, all of it. My dad was from Louisville, Kentucky in the South, grew up in the church, knew a lot of the spirituals, and we used to listen to, on Sunday mornings, you could hear opera, you could hear Mahalia Jackson.
Yeah.
This was what I grew up listening to. So, but to me, like I said, the rootsier and the more countrified way of singing blues or gospel was what really hit me the hardest, even though I'm a city-bred guy.
And you sing it from a young age. You started playing guitar at 8, but you singing from young as well.
Yes, I was. My dad was a great singer, and I sang early on in choirs and always trying to play guitar and sing at the same time. I don't think I've developed into a kind of singer that, really has that kind of authority that I wanted always for so long, that eluded me for so long. I feel like that's kicking in now at the ripe old age of 71. I've always loved singing, but I've always admired singers who were a lot more advanced than I was in terms of what they could do in terms of range. I always felt really quite limited. And it hasn't been until fairly recently that I've understood that, my strengths as a performer come from basically focusing on my strengths and So there was no idea, there was no point in trying to be, you know, the next Sam Cooke. You know, it's best to understand your I don't want to say limitations, but your strengths and vulnerabilities as a singer, and turn that into something that's comfortable, so that you're not always straining to achieve something that's a little bit beyond you. You're kind of resting in who you are, and hopefully that resting, relaxed way of performing will lead to a development of your technique. You know, it's kind of like that. But it takes a while to figure that stuff out. You know, I think most singers are always trying to sound different, you know, than they do.
You sounded pretty great to me. I've not heard any of that. I mean, every time I've heard you sing, it's been incredible. And I was good. That was kind of leading on to the next thing I talked about, was doing live performance. And the first person I thought of when I saw you live the first time was Richie Havens. And I know that he's a big hero of yours. And I remember watching Richie Havens and like the first time at Glastonbury, and it was like everyone was, you know, mellow and smoking and mellow. And he came on stage, and it just turned basically the acoustic stage into the dance tent. And I remember when I first saw you, it was a very small venue in the middle of nowhere, and then it was a big sold out venue, but it compared to, you know, but it was like the audience was all mellow, and you came on and you just lifted the whole room, and it was quite amazing to watch as someone who'd just been on the stage themselves, just to see, and it reminded me of Richie Havens. It was that same energy.
Listen, you know, I could write a book about my connection to Richie Havens, because after my dad, who was my first and biggest hero, probably the next big hero was Odetta. Fabulous singer and guitarist who really rocked my world, my young world. The person who came directly after Odetta in the lineage was Richie Havens. As a teenager, you know, I followed Richie Havens like a mascot. I went to every reachable gig in the New York area, whether it was down in the Village or up in White Plains, New York, or whatever. I wanted to be there, whether he was playing alone or with another guitarist or a conga player. And I loved him mostly alone, because, man, he electrified me. I mean, the way he played and the way he sang with that intensity, that commitment to he was living every song he was singing. He would get his head down there, and his right hand would be going like, you know.
Big song chords, I remember. It was
over the
monster songs.
He totally enthralled me. Absolutely. So I'm just happy to hear that you thought of Richie, because he's it. And then after Richie came Taj. And and just in terms of, there were so many performers and singers and writers who influenced me. But in terms of a real kind of role model, kind of role influence on me, it would be my dad, Odetta, Richie, and Taj, you know, and everybody else who I've ever seen and loved. But those four. Let's see, my dad, Richie, Odetta, Richie, and Taj. That quartet, I can point to any day of the week as being people who really have a lot to do with who I think I am as a performer. Yeah.
That's a pretty good live band you just put together there, if they're all together. It'd be pretty cool. That's good. That's great, because it's on the new album, Taj Mahal. Is funky like blues funky like that. That is cool, man. I love that. What was that like having?
And the other guest on that tune, Taj is playing harmonica and doing his ad-lib asides, and the other featured guest is a young player named John Tavius Willis. And I say young because he's like 25, from Georgia, African American, wonderful player and singer who. I don't know how he's done it in his short years, but really embodied, you know, some of the older, you know, Blind Willie McTell, Curly Weaver, Buddy Moss, older players, you know, from a certain era back in the 30s, and who just, I don't know, he's got something that's so authentic sounding. Plus, he's a Southerner, so his vocal vernacular is so suited to the music. So he's part of that song, Blues Funky Like That.
It's great. Steve Jordan's on the record too. What a drummer. Great.
Yeah, he's just phenomenal. And I was in the studio with him together with some other phenomenal musicians, Tommy Sims, and at that time it was Eric Gale was in the studio with us too. Man, but Steve Jordan, he has a kind of his hit, on a snare is so it's like the law. It's so authoritative.
Yeah.
So in terms of a groove, if you're playing with somebody like that, you just sound so good, because you're just leaning on an amazingly body-friendly beat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It helps.
It does. More and more, it's funny, I can tell you, Sean, as a fellow writer and performer, I think, in my younger years, I was very preoccupied with harmonies and chords and melodies and intervals. And as a writer, it took a while for me to really understand how, and as a performer for sure, how vital it is to really let the rhythmic aspects, the groove, be also as dominant. Because if you've got a great groove, and I can watch a solo performer like I remember the first time I saw, what's his name? The guy who wrote Tina Turner's song, Dancing.
Paul Gray?
Tony.
Oh, sorry.
Tony Joe White.
Paul Gray.
I saw Tony Joe White in Australia alone with his Fender and his amp and his foot. And his groove was so stable and steady and solid that he was just leaning into it. And so there was no strain involved. If you really let the rhythmic, even as a solo finger pick or whatever, but if you really let the groove relax you and the audience, then you can just put your vocal in there, and it's just, that's really the way to go. And when you start losing that rhythmic surety, then you start messing up, then you start losing.
And with the tours that you have coming up, what's the lineup going to be? Is that sorted, or are you?
Yeah, it's sorted. Fortunately, I have a kind of interesting start for the Australian tour, which is going to last 2 months.
Wow.
The first month is solo.
Solo? Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And the second month is with the band. So I'm really looking forward to both of those parts of the tour because, to really, I always, Sean, I love playing with other people. I love, playing with and off other folks. But my first dream as a musician was to be able to accompany myself and put across a really, captivating rendition of a good song, whether it was mine or somebody else's. And to do that in a complete way so that people weren't thinking, oh, it was good, but it was a little too naked. I wish I had a bass player.
Yeah.
I always wanted to just be able to do it. So I'm really happy to have the chance to really dive into that world again. And then bringing the band is a wonderful group of people. The bass player for the English tour, for the Australian tour, is a man named Desmond Foster, originally from London. A great bass player, grew up in London, Jamaican heritage, played with David Byrne, played with lots of people. The drummer is Paul Robinson from England, who played with Nina Simone for 20 years. Yeah. The guitar player is Krista Lissarides from Stockholm, who I played with for decades here. A wonderful player. So yeah, it's going to be a party. And in the UK, I hope we'll be joined by Glenn as well, my producer, who's a multi-instrumentalist who just...
Nice.
Yeah, he can sing, he can play, whatever. It's nice to know folks like that, huh?
Absolutely. And the new album is out. Is it out already?
March 24th. March the
24th.
Is the original. We have already a single that's doing well called Family. Just heard it on BBC the other night. Good sign. I think Jazz FM has got it on a playlist. It's called Family. And that's a really groovy kind of funky tune. It's also kind of a tribute to Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah.
It's musically, my producer Glenn just went there. And I'm playing a 6-string banjo on it, which is really a cool instrument.
Did you watch the Woodstock, the 1969 documentary set in I was thinking New York, 1969.
Yeah, New York. It was in Harlem. It was called that. It was kind of like the Black Woodstock.
That's it. Sorry, yeah.
It was a hot summer of, I don't know. Anyhow, I've seen it with Nina.
Yeah.
And everybody else. That was quite an event. Jesus. And it kind of got overshadowed, like you say, by Woodstock, you know. But it was a great gig, man.
Absolutely. Zoom is telling me I got 5 minutes and something minutes left. But is there anything, like, you got the new album coming out in March, the tour, Australia, the UK? Yeah, things sound like great, man. It's really great. I'm really glad that it sounds good.
I'm happy. It's all good. And Sean, you know, if you feel like this, the other stuff you haven't covered, just send me an email with a suggestion for a time. It can be even a little later. Well,
yeah,
not today, but tomorrow or something. We can follow this up if you got anything.
It's great chatting, man. I'm to say this is an interview, I'm just chatting. I had some kind of fun of them. I can't actually read them, but it's been really nice talking. And
the same, you know. And somehow you get to what you need. But like I said, there might be something that you say, oh, I wish I'd asked him. So feel free. You can do it, you know, however you want. You can call me or whatever, you know.
Oh, actually, one more thing to do with the live performance. How does it work? Like, you obviously would set this. I mean, how do you approach an audience? Because like I said, I've seen you play in so many different environments, so many different gigs. I remember there was one time at Glastonbury I saw you, and the audience was like rowdy drunk, man. I remember them. It was very, and I was in the audience. I think I was probably rowdy drunk at the time. But you just came on stage and you just had this real grit to the way you played, and I loved it because I'd seen you very welcoming, and it was just kind of like right, and it was like bang, and it was you didn't say a whole lot, but you had this huge response to the crowd. And I remember thinking, I'd watched you about a year before in the Netherlands, you'd hear a pin drop, and it was so different. Is it like an empty canvas for you each time you stand on the stage? Do you have a plan? Do you have things that you follow?
I don't really have a plan. It's not really a plan. It's just I really just try to relax. And being prepared, well prepared, has a lot to do with the relax factor. The times when I felt a little shaky or too shaky for my taste on stage have been when I felt like, oh, I got to perform some songs and I'm not really totally familiar with. Usually if I'm in my zone, if I'm feeling like I know what I'm doing and this is going to work, you know, I usually feel confident enough that I can, without having to, you know, get nasty or say
that gig was difficult. I mean, I remember the thinking, God, these guys are a real pain, and they were really out of it. But you won them over straight away, and it was great.
Good to hear. That's good to hear.
It was great, but brilliant. Thank you so much, man.
Love talking and like.